On episode 6, we discuss difficult conversations at school. To see the full video version and resources for this program, head over to teachcow.com. And to be live and interactive with us on future shows, just text at teachcow to the number 81010 to receive a 2-hour reminder before every live show. I'm your host, Oscar Cielo Staten. And good evening, everyone, and welcome to Teachers Talk Live. Today we're facing difficult conversations at school. What thoughts come to mind when you hear this? The fact is they happen. They happen for a reason, and they must continue to happen. Today we will explore the process that goes on in our head as initiators even before we begin the difficult conversation. What are our goals? What are possible outcomes? We will explore what happens during the conversation between the initiator and the second party. We will discuss what happens after the conversation's over. Did we reach our intended goal? Was it productive? What happens next? Let's get deep into this issue by introducing our wonderful guests. By the way, today we have a wonderful principal and a superintendent. So let's go ahead and introduce them. Let's start with Jason. Go ahead.
Well, yes, I'm Jason Cross, and I am a former principal actually in Colorado for Legacy Academy. So I'm excited about that, and I'm currently working with a professional development company that I get to go around to all schools all over the country and in other countries as well, and help them with their professional development needs, specifically with educational technology. So I'm currently with Kyte Learning, and so you can check it out at kytelearning.com, but that's what I'm doing right now. But I've been a long-time teacher, principal, administrator, the whole bit, and I am so excited to be here. Thank you, Oscar, for having me.
Thank you very much. Dr. Goins?
Yeah, hello everyone. Oscar, it's great to see you again. Jason, nice to meet you for the first time. I'm Greg Goins. I'm a school district superintendent in the state of Illinois. This is my 14th year as a school district superintendent. Spent 2 years as a high school principal, spent 5 years in the classroom teaching high school English, journalism, junior high social studies, physical education. I'm a proud member of the TeachCal Network. I host the Going Digital show on Tuesday nights right here, and Oscar's kind enough to have me on as part of the team, and that podcast is for K-12 school leaders. And I'm just glad to be here as a guest tonight, hopefully going to get some great ideas from Jason, and hope everyone out there can tweet their questions to us with the EduLive hashtag.
Yes, so make sure you guys that if you're listening to this that you are at teachcow.com, because on there you can use the chat window on the left side for Twitter, and we also have a separate chat window on the right side that you can participate in if you don't have Twitter. So let's go ahead and begin. Difficult conversations at school happen all the time, and as I said at the beginning, sometimes they need to happen. So how do we navigate those in a positive manner? I've been checking out some resources today, and I want to hear from you guys. So who wants to begin? Jason, do you have any examples of some that you have encountered?
Oh, in all my days of school, I never ever had to have one difficult conversation. Nothing could be further from the truth, nice. Right? No, it's difficult conversations. I think in school, because of the dynamics and all the different things that are at work, happen almost every day. And
right.
And certainly as a school principal, I think you just go from difficult conversation to difficult conversation, and because everybody's got a stake in the game. This is important, right? We're dealing with what's best for children, and we're doing these amazing things, and we're working hard, and we're building all this curriculum, we're doing these fun things, but in the process, we've got people's lives in our hands, and because of that, it can get pretty difficult and heated. And so, I have countless examples of where we, teacher conversations, parent conversations, even student conversations that are difficult to have. Right. And so, I'm excited to kind of break into this a little bit and talk about how that process actually gets broken down, because sometimes I think you rush into them.
Exactly. So one of the things that I was hoping we'd do is, like you said, Jason, break it down into the different categories, because it seems that there are different conversations to have, and they have different dynamics. One would be a teacher to superior conversation. So I consider a superior to be either the principal, the a coach can be an evaluator, a separate evaluator can be a superior, and that has some different dynamics than would happen between a teacher and a parent conversation, and we can get into that as well. What is the dynamic that you have when you're having a teacher-parent interaction that's difficult, and then a teacher-teacher. What's the dynamic when you are both colleagues in the same level? What happens then, and how do you navigate that? So as one of the things that I found that I found in my research, one of the papers that I read, something stuck out at me, and one of the things that it said is that you're not the only one who's right. When you're going into something, you have to keep in mind that you're not the only one who's right. What has been your experience with from a principal standpoint? What has been your experience with a difficult conversation you've had to have with a teacher?
Right. I've had so many different instances where teachers come to my office and we've had something, or I've maybe done an observation and I've noticed something, and maybe the teacher wasn't super receptive to hearing any feedback or getting any advice, and so the thing for me that took me a while, and I don't think I was great at this when I first started in being a school administrator, but was to leave out emotion. That was a big thing for me. So when I have a teacher come in that's emotional about some sort of a topic, I had to really force myself to leave that emotion out of our conversation and really sort of help dial it down a bit. And you have to kind of break the conversation down into what's really going on, and that requires listening. So not only can you not be emotional, but even if you feel I am 100% right on this, you have to really take that time to listen. And then that's really where your comment comes in. At that point of listening, you may find a crack in what you were thinking, and that's when you can really sort of come about it at a better approach and gain some little bit of understanding. But for me, one of the things that I always use, have you guys ever read the book Shifting the Monkey by Todd Whitaker? Have you guys read that book? I always, there's this, it's a great read because he talks a lot about this type of thing, about difficult conversations and really kind of what's at the heart of them. But he has a quote in there that he uses where he says, "Don't engage in conversations about excuses." And I always liked that, because what sometimes happens when you have the emotion in it is the conversation, the thing you're trying to accomplish just becomes a bunch of excuses that are bouncing back and forth. Why didn't you tell me about the event we were having? Well, you didn't do the thing that I asked you to do in the email, and it starts to bounce back and forth, and really you're just engaging in a conversation that's not productive. It's just about excuses, and it'll drag you both down. And so, for me, it's really about bringing that level, that emotion out of it, and really starting to come out of it with a little more of a level head. And then as an administrator, my thing is you've just got to listen. You just gotta put it all aside and just listen and hear what they have to say.
Yeah, Dr. Goins, what happens? In your experience, what happens when what Jason's saying about if you're the initiator of this conversation and you're right, but you have to listen to this person? How do you bite your tongue? How do you do it?
Well, I think Jason hit the nail on the head when he said basically that, difficult conversations come in all shapes and sizes. Mm-hmm. And it may be a difficult conversation that I need to have with one of my principals. It may be a conversation with a parent, a teacher. I've even had difficult conversations with small children. And sometimes those are the most difficult conversations.
Yes.
You know,
And most often they're right.
Yeah, you're trying to explain to them that what they, you know, their actions were inappropriate, and it's a teachable moment, and what you say matters in those situations. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, I think Jason's right. You know, you have to listen, you have to keep an open mind, and everyone has their own unique perspective. They see things through their own unique lens. And, you know, as a school leader, there has to be a great deal of clarity when you have those conversations. There has to be understanding as to why we're here. No one wants to have a difficult conversation. You know, Jason and I don't wake up going to work every day looking forward to doing some of these unpleasant things that we have to do. But, you know, it's part of the job, and accountability is a big part of what we do in public education. So, you know, hopefully you'll find some common ground at the end of those conversations. And the ultimate goal is when everyone walks away from that experience, you're going to be able to take something positive away from it, and that person's going to improve as a teacher or as a school employee. So, you know, that's kind of the ultimate goal. Try to, you know, deal with the situation head on, be as transparent as you can. But then the ultimate hope is that everyone's going to walk away a little bit better for it.
Exactly. And how do you, and this is to either one of you, how do you keep it student focused? You know, the end goal being the student, because out of school, that's what you're there for. So how do you maintain that with a person you're having a difficult conversation with? How do you bring it back to that?
I'll take that question, Oscar.
Okay.
You know, I make it very clear in my district that we're going to make decisions that are best for kids. And sometimes the adults in the building have difficulty grasping that concept because in a lot of communities, your school districts may be your largest employer, and you have a lot of people, and there's a political element to it as well in local communities. But you know, sometimes we just need to refocus and think about, you know, how does it affect the kids in your classroom? Because that's what really matters. And those, you know, that's a whole different dynamic when you're having these difficult conversations. It's not about you, the adults. I mean, you've already had your school experience, and kids today want a different school experience. And we talk about using technology in the classroom and those types of things. So we have to really put what's best for kids at the forefront of all decisions we make. And again, that adds another element to those conversations.
Exactly. I from the teacher standpoint, I remember one of my first years in teaching, I was on the receiving end of a difficult conversation in which the principal was telling me that we would have to regroup our class because of the numbers. Because of, you know, that happens a lot in districts. But to me, it was really tough because I'm just like, these are my students, these are my babies. And when she reminded me of what's best for the students, I got it. You know, we're doing this because this is what's best for the students. We need certain groups to be together, certain numbers to match. And so when she said that, it shifted for me. It wasn't as tense as before because of it being student-centered, leaving the conversation student-centered.
Right.
So yeah, Jason?
Yeah, so, you know, I just wanted to add on to, you know, again, in agreement with what you guys had to say, but one of the things I do, so, well, there's a couple things. Number one, to be able to have that student-centered focus, you sort of have to engineer that into your culture of your school to begin with. So I find that, like, you can prevent some of these difficult conversations by really engineering your school to have, you know, that one goal in mind, to the point where, you know, I used to even tape that thing of what's best for the students right on my monitor at school, because even when I was responding to an email, I had to kind of use that as my filter. You know, if I'm talking to a parent or I'm talking to anybody and it's a difficult conversation or a difficult email even, you know, you have to be constantly reminding yourself of that one thing. And it really, I think you engineer that into your school. And then the other thing about it is, you know, I think you have to be able to articulate why you're having the difficult conversation in the first place. And if you can't articulate why you're having the difficult conversation, then you can probably already say that you're not doing what's best for children. So you have to kind of take a step back and say, am I able to articulate this problem? Am I able to really actually give a thorough explanation of why I'm going to have this conversation with somebody, especially if you're the instigator of the conversation? So, I would often have a teacher come just out of pure emotion and instigate a conversation with me. And sometimes, that's what I would ask them to do is just kind of slow down and say, hey, take a couple minutes, articulate your thoughts, organize yourself a little bit, and then illustrate it to me a little better so I can understand it. And it was really out of just, I have to be able to understand what this problem you're facing really is so that we can actually move forward.
Right. Well said. Something that I read as well is that the delivery when you are the deliverer of a difficult conversation is that delivery must be centered, it must be supportive, it must be curious and problem solving. So curious in the aspect of wanting to learn more about the receiving end person, wanting to understand, because that's really important, that you understand, even if what they're saying is completely wrong, but you understand why they're saying it,
right?
And that you take it from a problem solving aspect,
right? Absolutely.
So the next part that I want to explore with you guys is also teacher to parent, that communication, and that can be also principal to parent and superintendent to parent, but that brings in its own difficulties, because so from the teacher standpoint myself, it's a different dynamic for me, because as the classroom teacher, I can invite the parents into my classroom. I can make them part of the community that I have within my classroom, and they're more apt to take more hard news from me. But and I suppose you can do that as a principal, as a superintendent as well, but it has to be there. I would ask you guys, like, what are the dynamics of that when from your point of view?
Oscar, I think I've dealt with parents for a lot of years as a teacher, principal, now as a superintendent, and really it just comes down to them wanting to be heard. And listening is such a valuable skill in what we do each and every day. And right. I've had the toughest thing to do for any person is to just sit there and listen and let the parent or let the person you're dealing with maybe let off a little bit of steam, and bite your tongue a little bit and just go ahead and play it out and let that conversation evolve. And I think that's so important. And a lot of times at the end of those conversations, after the parent or whoever I'm dealing with may calm down a little bit, my question's always the same. What can I do to resolve this problem? And it's amazing how many times there's really not a solution that they have in mind. They just wanted you to sit there and listen to them for 15 minutes and tell you how they felt. And I do a lot of that. And I know Jason's probably done a lot of that over the years too. And I think teachers are in the same boat. That's why we have those parent-teacher conferences. If you want to come in and talk with the teacher and find out more about what's going on, that's great. But just understand that this is the parent's opportunity to come in and talk to you. It's fine to give them information about student discipline or grades or lunch bills or those kind of things, but the focus has to be on the parent and ultimately on the student.
And I got to ask, is that time consuming?
Very much so. But that's what we do. And if you're going to be in a leadership position, that's a typical part of your day as a school administrator or as an educator, really, in the 21st century. Right.
Go ahead,
I can
Jason.
just interject there. As far as the teacher-parent conversations, all you teachers that may be listening, really, you can never over communicate with your parents, and I know that you've probably heard every principal in the world tell you that, but it's really, really true. And again, that comes to, you can prevent these difficult conversations by essentially engineering the outcome. So if you are one of those just excellent communicators with your parents, and you're really putting out all the information, and they don't feel like they're lacking in knowledge of what's happening during the day, they will typically not come at you with the same type of conversation. They feel like they're included, and it's just as you were saying, it really is that inclusion and wanting to be heard that's at the heart of what they're after. So really over communicate everything you can, and then you can kind of prevent that parent conversation.
Right. And I want to mention a quote that I'm sure you guys know that says, "I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care." Right. I think that's key, especially with the parent relationships. It's so important, and the parents are so crucial. This would go into a different show, but they're really your advocates if you're a teacher. And so including those teachers and I mean, including those parents and making sure they're heard is really, really important. Right.
And it's hard because sometimes they're accusatory, and sometimes they can come at you and even take it to a personal level. But again, it's you have to kind of ignore those attacks and just move to the, and bite your tongue, do all those things that you were just talking about, but then sort of let it dissipate a little bit before you engage back. And then make sure that you can articulate your point of view after that. And if you're wrong, it's totally okay for a teacher to say, you know what, that wasn't my strongest thing I did today. And just go ahead and tell them, and sometimes that goes a long way too. Sometimes they just don't want to have that battle,
Right.
And, Oscar, I think, we can't just assume that we're only going to have these difficult conversations in our offices at school. You have these conversations out when you're shopping at Walmart, when you're at the park watching a Little League game. I mean, if you're going to be an educator, you're really on the clock 24/7. And I've had some very interesting conversations at some very interesting venues. But, you try to be respectful, you try to listen, and, you may have to tell them, I would love to talk about this in greater detail. If you can come to my office one day this week, we'll sit down and we'll have a Coke and I'll listen to you, and we'll try to problem solve and come up with some solutions. But really, you have to be ready at any time to have any type of conversation when you're in public education.
That's got to be tough. The only kind of interactions that I've had as a teacher is, and I explain this to non-educator friends, that when you're a teacher, when you're an educator, principal, and even a superintendent, I can only imagine, you're sort of a pseudo celebrity, wherever you go, you're spotted in places. And so I've had those encounters with parents and teachers, but I've never have had to have a difficult conversation with either one. But I can imagine it's got to be tough.
And Jason could probably back me up on this, but very rarely do we get calls from people that want to tell us what a great job we're doing. If the phone rings in my office, there's usually some type of problem that we're going to have to begin to sort through, and that's just kind of part of doing business each day.
Yeah,
that is the truth, and sometimes it does make you a little timid to answer the phone, and because you're when you've been beat down a little bit, sometimes you're like, do I want to pick this up? But tempo is another thing you can kind of do. Use a slower form of communication. Try to ramp down your speech. Try to not talk too fast. Those types of things tend to diffuse it a little bit. And it's really kind of customer service. I always kind of taught that to my teachers. It's a customer service role. These parents are stakeholders, and so you have to kind of treat it like that. And we've all seen that difficult conversation in the grocery store or at the return counter and during Christmas where, I want to return this. No, you can't return this. And you get the back and forth, and it becomes, escalated like that. It's not really healthy in schools to have those kinds of conversations. So know that there is a way that you can both win, and you can get out of this situation with a good solution in place. And that'll help you kind of bring that tempo down a little bit.
Right. Right. So I have a question from Wise Chaz on the Teach Cow chat window, and I don't know if which one of you wants to take this one. So the question is, have you guys considered having a female staff sit in on those conversations with the emotional female teachers? I don't.
Yeah, I don't know who. If Dr. Greg wants to take it, he can. But I
You
haven't
know,
answered.
that's actually a good question. And, you know, a lot of times it's good if you're in a leadership position, if you're going to have those difficult conversations. It's not uncommon for me to pull a third party in just as a witness, someone to take notes, because it's usually a situation, some type of conflict is brewing. And, you know, maybe it's a union situation where you have a representative from the teachers union that's going to sit in. And, you know, definitely if you're dealing with kids, it's really good to pull in your secretary or pull in another administrator just so you can have a witness there and make sure that you have all your bases covered. So, you know, I think that's something I talk with a lot to young administrators. I have the good fortune of teaching a little bit in a master's level principal preparatory program. And I always tell them, you know, you have to document everything that you do, and
Right.
don't be afraid to pull in someone else just to kind of be that second set of eyes and ears for you.
Right. Yeah, let's move on. Unless you have something to add, Jason.
You know, no, I've just had that exact scenario happen a couple times, you know, with different things, and there's even HR responsibilities that I had at my school that, yeah, I brought in people and I tried to bring in the appropriate person to kind of match the environment. And I also looked at just personality types. So that other person I brought into the room, it can get real tricky because it looks really adversarial when it's 2 against 1.
Right.
So you have to be very, very careful not to have that event turn into 2 against 1. You want that extra person there, but at the same time, you've got to for sure make sure you're not sitting behind your desk. You got to get around front. You got to be close to people. You know, anything that's in between you and the other person is going to create more of an adversarial relationship. So you've got to really make sure when you have more than one person in the room with you that you are eliminating anything that could potentially make that other person feel like they're being attacked.
Exactly. And I think that's an excellent point, Jason. And in terms of the power structure, the hierarchy of school districts, I mean, obviously it's very much a top-down type of system, and it can be very intimidating for people to come to my office or your office and have those conversations. And the last thing I want to do is, you know, be the great Oz in the big chair behind the big desk and you know, have that type of environment. A lot of times I will move into our conference area where we can be seated at a conference table. And I've also had a lot of those difficult conversations actually in the teacher's classroom. So it's more of a level playing field when you're having those conversations. So that's a great point.
Right. So, a question I have for you guys is, what about teacher evaluator or teacher coach relationships? What have those been like as far as difficult conversations in your experience?
Well, you know, I can start if you want me to. You know, it can be interesting because, you know, it's just like teaching a group of kids. Your student that always turns in his homework and always has his stuff done and is doing everything in the proper order and has all that stuff, that conversation is never difficult. So you automatically every year kind of know who your difficult conversations are going to be with. So this could be student, teacher, as well as administrator, teacher, because I feel like that's really the role there is we're trying to help administrators do what's best for kids, and we're trying to give them tools. And sometimes you'll see areas where they fall short, and it's real easy for you to just point out that and say, whoa, you've really, you know, kind of messed up here, and that's not good. But instead, you kind of have to approach it in a more teamwork style way. And that's before you have that conversation with them, it's got to be very, very well planned out and thought through. And you have to not only be able to say, this is what I saw, but you have to give a very articulate answer of how that behavior can change. Otherwise, you're kind of asking for it.
Right. What about if you don't, say you have, either one of you, say you have a coach or an evaluator, and that you sense they're not doing the most collaborative thing for that teacher, what kind of how do you continue from there? Because it's always, we always think that that a coach or evaluator is doing something that's not gotcha, that they're doing something that is collaborative and productive to improve that teacher, improve their craft. But what if it doesn't come across that way, I guess?
I've never really viewed the evaluation process as that gotcha moment where, the principal comes in and they're going to use this as leverage against you. Maybe, if there's some type of agenda in doing that. Evaluation to me is all about working in a collaborative way, finding ways for that individual teacher to improve and to grow professionally. And Unfortunately, going back to the power structure that we have in schools, it's very intimidating for some people to have that evaluator come in and even going through the evaluation process, checking all the boxes and talking about, what you excel at and areas of weakness. And, I think evaluation should be again, let the teacher be more involved in the overall process. Let that person talk more. I'm a big believer in self-evaluation before you actually get to the formal evaluation. And just ask them, what areas do you think you're strong? What areas do you think there's room for improvement? And how can I help you as a school administrator or as a building leader? What resources can I provide to help you achieve your goals? And I think that's what evaluation needs to be. And hopefully we're all moving that direction.
And just to add to that, by the way, too, this is just something I just want to toss out because it's something it's a pet peeve of mine that I see in schools. I get to travel around and I see different administrators doing this all the time, and that is really something again that Todd Whitaker says, which is never address the entire group about the behaviors of one person. And I don't know how many times I see that thing happen. So I go in and I see something happen. I evaluate something in a classroom. And then what I'll do is I go to a meeting where all 30 of us are in a room and I say, hey guys, whatever you do, don't do this. And what I've essentially done is I've taken all the good people and I've treated them bad. And the one person that needed to hear the message, right, they're like, well, was that me? I don't know if that was me. So it didn't even do any good, in the first place. So you really do have to, handle yourself, appropriate. And I couldn't agree more with all the things that Greg said there about, preparing and doing the self-evaluations. I think that's all, great stuff.
Jason, what you just said from the perspective of a teacher is a big aha moment for me. Seriously, just the idea, because I've heard this so many times as a teacher, you guys shouldn't be doing this, or maybe you could be doing this better or that better. And it always leaves me kind of wary, kind of like, I thought I was doing that correctly. I thought,
Yeah. And Todd Whitaker always gives this example. When you walk into an antique shop, the first thing you typically see in an antique shop is a sign that says, if you break it, you bought it. And the minute you see that sign, you feel kind of like, whoa, and you no longer feel welcome in the store. You feel like everything's a no touch. You're scared. It's just not a great environment all of a sudden. But the fact of the matter is that you're not going to break anything, and nor is 99% of the people that come into your store. So you've just punished your entire customer base off of what potentially one person is going to do. So what you have to do instead is just deal with that one issue, that one difficult conversation, as opposed to punishing the group and not having that conversation. So it's a kind of an avoidance thing that sometimes I think administrators do, and I'm definitely guilty of this, by the way. It hits me right in the heart because I've done it several times. But it's just a thing out there. It's such a pet peeve. I always try to say it whenever I get a chance. Don't punish the group. Just deal with that one difficult conversation.
Have a difficult conversation. Hopefully we're helping
Right.
you here know how to do it.
Right. Exactly.
I have Nicole McGuire who says our school has some parents that will start recording using smartphones during difficult conversations. What would you suggest with that situation?
Well, we have so many digital tools at our disposal now, and you look at an app like Periscope. It's pretty easy to just live stream whatever is happening in the vicinity of yourself and your cell phone. So,
Right.
I mean, that's just the world we live in, and that's going to become more and more acceptable. In my mind, there would probably be an issue of trust if that's the way we're going to start the conversation. But if that's the way we need to start it, it is what it is. And my hope would be that, after we dive a little deeper and talk about what the problems are, maybe you could start rebuilding that trust and maybe make some progress as that conversation continues.
Yeah, that seems to be a matter of trust.
You have to take a deep breath, too, by the way, because a lot of times that is a tactic to kind of shift a problem that the parent has onto your back. So you have to remind yourself of exactly what is going on and what's at stake. And most of the time it's the parent or the child that has some sort of a problem. And that tape recording thing is designed to sort of intimidate you. And that's why all the things we talked about are so important. That's why you have to get emotion out of it. That's why you got to slow down. That's why you can't make it about anything personal, and that's for sure why you can't accuse anybody of anything, and you can't attack. You have to listen, because if you're listening, that recorder's not going to pick up a lot of stuff except for what they're saying. And the first one sometimes to open their mouth is the one that's going to make a mistake. And so you got to sometimes just sit back and just and listen. And you'd be surprised that when you are listening for a long period of time, how a hand might reach up onto the table and turn the recorder off and put it back in the pocket, because all of a sudden that trust is now back and everybody's not amped up and ready to kind of rumble. Instead, it's
Right.
that nice, calm conversation.
That's another great reason to think about what we actually say during those conversations. It's so important to use positive vocabulary and really set a positive tone for that conversation. But once you've kind of figured out who you're talking to and maybe what their intent is, that I typically try to focus on the student, and hopefully I have a little bit of background information about that student, but I immediately turn to, let's talk about Johnny a little bit. I saw him on the playground and I got to talk with him a little bit, and I know he's excited about this or that, and I know he's doing well in math, and try to shift that conversation maybe to some of the more positive things that are happening in that child's life. And a lot of times, you can really shift that conversation and become an advocate with that parent as to maybe a lot of the great things that are happening in that child's life.
Right. And, it all goes back to, especially with conversations with parents, all goes back to a welcoming environment, an environment of trust. And I'm not saying that's the only solution, but, the very first thing that I do in a classroom as a teacher is to send out as many invites as I can, newsletters, information, parent communication as much as possible, and welcome them into the classroom. One of the first things that we do at the beginning of the year is throw a party, and we call it a tostada party. A potluck where we assign different kids to bring different ingredients for it. And so the parents are invited and we all get to know each other, sort of like an open house. And I think that sort of sets the scene and opens up the classroom and the communication between teacher and parent, which I think is so important. So teacher-teacher conversations, and I know I know, Dr. Greg and Jason, you've had teacher-teacher conflict, and without getting into specifics, what are some of the dynamics that go into this kind of, I don't know, is it a power struggle, a power play? What normally happens between those teacher-teacher conflicts?
Well, in every environment I've ever been in, the culture is slightly different. And I've seen very collaborative environments where teachers are working together, and you just don't see the same kind of conversations happening. And then I've worked in environments where two teachers right next door to each other just absolutely cannot get along. No matter what happens, those two just butt heads and they cannot get along. And I've also been in those conversations where I've been kind of maybe even a little frank with people in an office as a teacher talking to another teacher. And sometimes it comes down with us teachers, we're very entrepreneurial by nature. Right. And as these edupreneurs, we sometimes have egos that go along with that, and we from time to time think we know we're right. And so it is a difficult conversation sometimes to talk to a person that you need to partner with or work together. And I've had some conversations with teachers when I was a principal where I said, hey, I really need you guys to work together on this. And I could see by the looks on their face, they were like, no, we're not going to work together. And so it's an interesting dynamic to watch these things happen. And I think the culture of the building definitely helps. But this is where, number one, it's that we got to be student focused. I feel like if the teachers both have that view, right, most of the times we can put aside the other stuff. If a teacher is battling another teacher, it's definitely focused on one of the two of them or both of them. And ego needs to go and live with those kids. And we need to say, what are we trying to do to benefit them? And, these teachers want a more satisfied workday. They want to be able to say they've accomplished something. We as educators want to be responsible for something great that happened in the classroom. And so really that's what we have to aspire to and try to get to happen.
Right. Well said.
And, Oscar, I think, we all know that teachers are very passionate people. I mean, it's a great profession, but I think too many times as educators, some people have a tendency to get really locked in and have tunnel vision and really focus on what's happening just in their classroom or just in their hallway or maybe just in their wing. And I remember several years ago when we started the curriculum mapping process, and to get a group of teachers together in the library or in a large space and kind of have them share what they're doing and why, and talking about building a curriculum that doesn't have those gaps or repetitions, and really trying to build something that's really better for kids. It almost broke out into World War III because people are so passionate and they have this ownership about what they're doing. And teachers a lot of times aren't real willing to share and collaborate because they're so locked into what they're doing and they're so passionate. Right. And that's one of the great things about Twitter and social media. You see more and more teachers now that are on social media, they're blogging, they're sharing ideas. And I think that's just going to make us all better. So that's certainly a shift that I'm very happy to see. And I hope more and more teachers will be more collaborative and be more willing to share the great things they're doing in their classrooms.
Definitely. Yeah, you're right about that. It just seems like and I can speak from my experience. It seems, when we as teachers become really passionate about something, that we tend to have this tunnel vision when some genius idea comes into our heads, and it has to be that way. It has to be this way. And if it's not this way, it's not going to be good for the kids. But then, I'm sure you guys have had struggle with teachers that have that vision and can't seem to lock into the vision of what the whole school needs to have. How do you navigate that teacher into buying in to whatever the vision is of the school?
A lot of times it's just a matter of putting those teachers together in a small group situation and letting them actually have that open, honest, difficult conversation we're talking about. I don't have to be in the room for teachers to have difficult conversations with each other. And I encourage them to, set aside some time and, close the door and talk about things that's really going well and things that maybe aren't. And
Right.
it's kind of like, coaching a team. I have a lot of coaching experience. And some of the best team meetings we had, I was never in the locker room. So a lot of times teachers can kind of use that same model as our student athletes, and they can kind of take care of their own house and monitor themselves. And I think that can also be a successful way of moving forward.
Right, right. Um, you know, I've been itching to share this difficult conversation I had like an hour and a half before we came on. Uh, but I don't know how it relates. But basically, what happened is that on my way back from the gym, I stopped at Chipotle to get some tacos before I headed home. And so I'm in line, and there's a whole bunch of people behind me. And suddenly, this woman decides that she's just gonna get up in front of me, and I'm confused. At the first thought in my head is, oh, I must have cut in front of her at some point since I'm not paying attention. Maybe I did that. But if I did that, I wanted to let her know, like, oh, I'm sorry if I stepped up in front of you. But I let her just hang out and see what happens. And so next thing I know, the guy's about to take the order from her. And that's when I say, I'm sorry, were you in front of me? And she just looks bewildered and confused, and she says, oh, no, I wasn't. I don't know what's happening. And so she goes behind me. But for me, I felt like I needed to say something, not because I could have left it alone and just let her go in front of me. I didn't care. It wasn't like it was a long time to wait or anything like that. But part of me was thinking, oh no, did I cut in front of her? And now she's gaining back her place because I don't want to offend her or do anything like that. But it was a difficult conversational moment for me to have, and I just wanted to feel better about it, basically, by acknowledging, if I could have cut in front of you, I'm sorry, kind of thing. But yeah, it was just a difficult conversation that I had. It was funny. Anyway.
Well, I think it illustrates the point that these difficult conversations are just a part of life, right? And
Exactly.
And we can probably always work through our conversations better. And it's some of those things like that catches you when you're not expecting it. And I think those are the hardest conversations to have, are the ones that just blindside you because you didn't prep, you didn't prepare, you didn't have anything, you weren't planning on going to Chipotle and having a difficult conversation. It just sort of happened. That's definitely harder. Yeah.
And part of me wanted to avoid it. I wanted to avoid having a difficult conversation. I was just like, it's much easier for me to just let her go in front of me and have it be over, But at the same time, I was like, wait a minute, I'm about to go do a show about difficult conversations.
You got to have a couple before. You got to get a couple in there.
And Oscar, it goes back to the point that we always talk about. It's not what happens to you; it's how you react to it. And that's a teachable moment for kids, and we make that a part of our daily dialogue with kids. But we also need to have that same conversation with adults.
Right.
You need to, whatever happened over the weekend, you need to let it go, and you need to show up Monday morning ready to be a positive influence on kids because we're dependent on you. You have a job to do, and we're counting on you.
Exactly, and leave whatever emotions you can at the door. There's another question by Wise Chaz. She says, how do you handle accusations of not being sensitive enough because you don't show emotions? I don't know in what context she's talking about, but basically, I think one of the things that I read about difficult conversations is that one of the things it says is speak with care, not caution. Meaning that if you're delivering something that's difficult for the other person to hear, yes, do it with care, but not with caution of necessarily the other person's emotions. Like say, for example, you want your goal is to receive I don't know, grades by a certain day, and so that's your goal. That's the goal that you go in with. And it's more about being direct about what you want, I guess. Any thoughts on that?
I think when you're in a leadership position, people are always going to look to you and look at you as to how you're going to react, things you're going to say, mannerisms. And I think people need to understand, and Jason, you can jump in here. We really have to separate ourselves from the job that we're doing and the people that we are. I have a job to do, and I have to confront that head on, and I have to deal with those difficult issues. But, when I go home and talk to my wife at night, we don't have any conversations that would be related to specific things just due to confidentiality. But, I can share with her that, I was empathetic to the person that I was talking to. And I am, I understand the plight that they're in. And, it's okay to go home and shed a tear at the end of the day. And I've done that before, especially dealing with some tragic situations with students throughout my career. But, we're just normal people like anyone else. And, unfortunately, there's a box of Kleenex on my desk for a reason. And there's a lot of crying that happens. There are a lot of emotions that are spill out during those conversations. But at the end of the day, we have a responsibility to provide leadership, and people are looking at us to provide leadership. But we're just normal people, and we have those feelings as well on the drive home.
Exactly.
Yeah, and again, to just kind of expand on that a little bit, they used to call my office the cry room because almost every single person would come in there. It was the place to go in and cry, and it was okay. And a lot of times I came out of that room not crying. And so I could see how somebody would look at me and say, well, why are they not as emotional as I am about this topic? And I think that's really what it is that you get people coming in with a wide range of emotion, and they sort of want you to come alongside them and feel the same outrage or the same emotion that they had. And you don't always do that. And again, I was real big on trying to take emotion out of it. And so you sometimes come off a little matter of fact. And I think one of the hardest situations I ever faced was when I fully agreed with the other person that was coming into my office and was articulating a problem. I fully agreed with them, but maybe the policymakers or the government or somebody else didn't feel that way. And so I had to enforce a rule that was in place that maybe I didn't even agree with. That is a very, very hard situation. And so the only way I think you can handle it as an administrator is really leave that emotion out of it. But it's just to let teachers and parents and anybody else who might be listening know that there are a lot of times where my hands were tied and I was stuck with something that the school board made a decision about. And so I couldn't go against that particular ruling, even if I agreed with it. And in times like that, I'm not going to show emotion one way or the other. I'm probably going to come at it a little more flat-faced. But at the same time, I'm always empathetic. And I think you can always kind of give those empathetic tones and say, I hear what you're saying. I totally understand. I get where you're coming from. You can use that language to try to help diffuse the situation a little bit. And you can let them cry. It's okay to do that. And I always had the tissue box like Dr. Greg there, and I'd always say, here you go. I totally see where that question came from, because I was often accused of that. You're not being emotional enough. You didn't even care about my situation, and nothing could be further from the truth. Everybody that takes these offices and does these jobs, they care very deeply about every single student and teacher in the building. They really, really do.
And Oscar, in terms of trying to be more compassionate, we do go through that thought process of, yeah, we may have to deliver some bad news, or we may have to have these tough conversations, but how can we do it in a way that's best for the person you're talking with? And I learned very early on in my career, you never want to tell someone that you're going to have a difficult conversation and schedule it for 2 or 3 days down the road, because that's not fair to that person.
Right.
So you want to do it at a time that's going to be conducive to that person and that situation. And you also don't want to do it first thing in the morning. because that person's going to have to go back to the classroom and maybe be distraught or maybe not be at 100%. And that's not fair to your kids. So I always try to have those very tough conversations at the end of the day. And, and that's even against my typical ideal way of doing things, because I like to tackle the big problems on my to-do list immediately so I can kind of get them out of the way. But in a situation like that, I typically try to wait until the end of the day so they can go home and have some personal time to deal with, whatever it is they have going on.
Right. Speaking of timing, I have a question from Nicole asking about the teacher-to-teacher difficult conversations. She asked, when is the best time to bring those up? And I would think that it goes right with what you said, probably at a time after school. What do you think?
Well, I think you also need time to fully investigate what's going on. I mean, not everything is black and white when you're dealing with a lot of people in a lot of different situations. So the downside is it may take me a little while to dig a little deeper and find out what's going on. But then as soon as you kind of get the information you need, I certainly believe you have to address it and tackle it head on as quickly as possible.
Right. Going back to some of the stuff I read, one of the things that it said, in your head as you're about to deliver this difficult conversation is to check your emotions and check your attitude. Like you guys said, I think a lot of the emotions have to be taken out of it because you have a goal in mind. Whatever that goal in mind, you have to focus in on that goal and take as much as possible that emotion out of the conversation. So I would say, Nicole, also having there have been enough time passing where you can articulate exactly what you need from that other person. And also read that during the conversation, be present without a conclusion in mind. So, you may already have something that you want as an outcome. When you're hearing that other person, don't put that into your head. Just, listen before you paint that image of what you want to come out on the other side, I guess. So any thoughts on that?
I think you have hit that on the head, and it's hard, when you're talking about a teacher-to-teacher conversation. Obviously, you don't want to have it when class is going. So right. I know that I probably shouldn't have to say that, but I do. Make sure that it's just a one-on-one teacher conversation, because I have had parents come in and say, what was this conversation that the two teachers were having in my class, because my son came home and told me all about it. And so you want to make sure that you maintain your professionalism and know that these things can wait. And so I would always say, pick time, before, after class, or maybe even during a plan or something like that, and spend a couple minutes with it. And not to be too ended with this, but are you guys familiar with the group Improv Everywhere? Have you ever heard of those guys?
Are they the ones that get up in malls and do stuff?
Yeah, they do like the no pants day and stuff like that.
Hey,
we got
Brian showed up. Brian, how are you? Go ahead, Jason. So,
sorry, I didn't want to. If you need to introduce Brian, go for it. Well, there's an interesting thing that happens. I recommend everybody go to the TED Talks and watch the Improv Everywhere talk, because in that talk they show an improv skit where they have a young lady on a bus, and they do the no pants subway ride, and as she's on the bus and these guys are getting on the bus that don't have any pants on, she looks a little nervous, and she's actually apprehensive about what's actually happening. And what happens though later on is she makes a connection with somebody across the way from her, and she sees them, and the minute she sees them, she sort of smiles, and then all of a sudden everything feels okay. And the moral of that story, that long-winded story, is that if you're having tough, difficult conversations all the time with another teacher, try to have some experiences that are shared between you. So it's okay to take that teacher maybe that you're adversarial out, go out and maybe have lunch together, or go get some coffee or do something. Have some shared experiences, something that you two can kind of bounce off of each other, or something that's happened to you guys that sort of helps build your team up a little bit, because that will help ease those conversations, and you won't feel as apprehensive and you won't feel as nervous going into them. Just like that lonely girl on the subway who was kind of like, what's all this weird stuff happening to me about? When she had someone else to share the experience with, it wasn't so bad. And that's the way at school is as well. When the principal comes down and says, hey, we all have to do X, Y, and Z thing, if you have shared experiences amongst the staff tends to react a little better, and it makes those conversations a lot smoother.
Exactly. So Brian is here, and Brian, you're towards the tail end of this, but go ahead and introduce yourself, and maybe you can give us a little bit of insight of your teacher's perspective.
So I'm Brian Smith. I'm the RTI PD facilitator for Newton County River City Schools. And as far as difficult conversations, I know that it always helps to not tell yourself stories. Like, that's one of the big points. We all go through these scenarios in our head kind of before we have a difficult conversation. And, somebody's crossing their arms and we go, well, they must be mad at me because, and we can tell ourselves 1,000 different stories about why they're mad at us. And truthfully, they had slammed their finger in the car and they were holding their arms because it had nothing to do with us. And yet we've created this whole scenario in our head that we are then trying to address and compensate for that's not even real. So I took a training this summer called Crucial Conversations, and it was fantastic. And that was one of the things that we kind of talked about in that.
That's a great point.
That is a really good point, Brian. The perspectives that we have within ourselves are totally different from what another person has, and we may be on totally different wavelengths, or we may be on the same one, but we don't know it. So right. that has to be established first, before you assume something about the other person or have them assume something about you, just like the example I was giving earlier about my Chipotle experience that you missed. Any input from you guys, Jason, Dr. Goins?
Well, I totally agree. I thought that was just a very well articulated point. We make up I'm the biggest what ifer in the entire world, and I just go what if, and the whole time, like, I don't know. And sometimes it's to the point where I'm like, I don't even want to have this difficult conversation. I've talked myself so out of it now, because I've gone through all these scenarios. I'm gonna be, who knows what's gonna happen to me. I'm fired after this conversation, and so you have to put all that aside and just kind of say, well, I need to hear from them first. And I think that goes back to earlier points of listening, right? You just don't know what you're dealing with until you listen, and the listening is so hard when somebody is just accusing you, maybe even personally insulting you, just telling you everything is wrong. It's really hard to just listen, but you have to.
Right.
And Oscar, I think in terms of trying to build a little bit of trust and credibility with the people that you work with, hopefully this one conversation that you're having that may be difficult is really just one of many conversations that you've had throughout the year that were of a positive nature. So I don't like this scenario in which the administrator is walking through the hallway and you have teachers diving in broom closets because they don't want to see you coming. We have to get out of this mindset that because I'm coming to your room, we're going to have a difficult conversation. We need to be out in the building, interacting with people and having very positive conversations on a regular basis. So the only time they see me or Jason, it's not going to be a negative connotation. So.
Right. So I have a final question for you guys, and this goes for everyone, and I would like, if possible, to hear from all of you. So we've been talking today about difficult conversations and how they must happen. And, if you're a working professional, sooner or later they will have to happen. And so if they have to happen, how do you determine as an educator whether it be a teacher, coach, principal, even a parent, how do you decide what constitutes a difficult conversation that needs to happen versus something that you can let go?
Well, I'll go first. In my role as a superintendent, those conversations seem to find me pretty quick, so I don't have to go looking for them. And that's just part of my position as superintendent of the school district. But if there's a situation in which a decision has been made, or if a mistake has been made that we don't have the best interest of kids at heart, or if there's a situation in which adults in the building have turned that positive school culture into a negative environment, then that's a time in which I would certainly have to intervene and try to get the train back on the track, so to speak. But I'm interested to hear what Jason and Brad have to say. But from my perspective, those situations usually find me.
So Jason or Brian?
Brian, I'm sorry, Brian.
It's all good.
Yeah, let Brian go.
So Brian, what elements have to be in a situation before you decide that you need to have this conversation with someone?
I usually will try to allow time. If it's about meeting the best needs of a student and teacher to teacher, then it has to happen pretty quickly, usually, so that we can correct whatever's been going on. But if it's a me issue and it feels like it's a personal nature, I try to let time go to see if I can get over it, and if not, and sometimes I can't. And but we're all human. So that's when I will try to have those difficult conversations at that point, so that I can move back into a working relationship. Because what I find is, if I am struggling with letting something go for too long, then even that personal relationship, like that professional relationship, doesn't happen.
Right.
Because I have animosity. And so those difficult conversations, if I can't get over that animosity in a normal amount of time, then that's when I'll go and say, all right, I'm going to have to do this. And I don't want to, but I've got to, because I've got to work with this person still.
Right. If I could just make a point with what you're saying, which is really important, that time issue is really crucial, because you have to decide for yourself, is this something that I need to sit on and examine within myself to see if I can let it go, if it's not that important, or is it something that's time sensitive that I need to address right away?
Right.
know? That's a big difference.
It is.
Good point.
Well, if I suspect that I'm going to have a difficult situation, but I'm not totally sure that it's going to happen, or that, I can't get over it, sometimes I engage in a little bit of a fact-finding mission. So it goes back to the thing, I have to be able to articulate really well what the problem is going to be. I never wanted to go to a supervisor or anybody and say, here's how I'm feeling just off the cuff, and this is crazy, and I can't believe you brought that professional developer in, and that was boring, and I didn't like this, and I don't. Instead, I had to really go on a fact-finding mission, and maybe even have engaged in a couple conversations that weren't difficult, and just ask questions, so that I could gather information, and so that I could then come with an intelligent, articulated thought about, what I was after. So, I'll use that example. If I didn't like somebody that came into our building that gave us professional development, I would, and I know that never happens, right? But I would, maybe find out a little bit more about the situation, and then approach, the principal or somebody, and then just give them, some thoughts. Say, hey, so this is what I noticed. This is what my issue is. This is kind of what I saw happen. And that way I'm articulating it very well. And then I can also come up with some sort of a solution to the problem as well. So, offer a couple pieces of advice and be constructive in my approach of that conversation. And then really, it probably won't be that difficult. It'll be more of a conversation at that point, but it was how I approached it that really created that. So that's preventing difficult conversations by engineering that outcome. That's that thing I keep repeating over and over again, because it's really, really true.
Exactly. Well, good point. Everyone, this has been a really cool talk. And most of all, I think it has been positive, and I think we have discovered that we can always have something positive come out of these difficult conversations, as scary as they may seem, if you don't have them often, and Dr. Goins, as a superintendent, he has them all the time, as he said. So I guess to you, it'd be second nature that it's going to happen. But for some of us, every once in a while, when we have to have these difficult conversations, they're scary, and they may seem negative to us when they don't have to be, when there can be really positive outcomes. So, any last thoughts as far as what we have talked about, you guys?
I have one last little quote that I'd like to leave everybody with before we log off, because I think it's so great. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Simon Sinek, but he's a marketer, and he's pretty fun to watch sometimes. But he says there are only two ways to influence human behavior: you can manipulate it, or you can inspire it. And so I really just encourage everybody that's listening to the podcast, whatever you're doing in your education and teaching and everything, inspire. It's really going to help you out. You won't have as many difficult conversations. It'll be great. Do something inspiring for your students and have a wonderful time teaching.
Thank you very much. And this one more thought. Jason, you mentioned Simon Sinek, and you also mentioned a book, Shifting the Monkey.
It's called Shifting the Monkey, and it's by Todd Whitaker. And
it's amazing.
It's a great read. Yeah, it's a great read.
If you could do me the favor of tweeting that with EduLive, both of those things.
Absolutely.
I'm creating a resource on the Teachers Talk Live page with this podcast, and one of the things that's on there that I recommend you guys watch if you haven't seen is these videos by Dr. Fred Kaufman that are really good at playing scenarios with difficult conversations and all that. So definitely check it out. With that, I want to thank you all for watching. Please and listening. Please go ahead and go download the podcast Teachers Talk Live. You can access it on iTunes or on Stitcher. So, and to get reminders of the show, all you have to do is text to the number 81010. The subject would be @TeachCal. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. Have a good night.
Tune in to our live interactive programming every Wednesday at teachcow.com. You may email us at teachcow@gmail.com, under Twitter @teachcow, Facebook teachcow, and Google Plus Oscar Staten. On the website, you may find our other social media at teachcow.com. And if you would like to become a panelist on our show, we welcome you to contact us through teachcow.com. Thank you very much.